Matthew chapter 27. Very early in the morning, the leading priests and the elders of the people met again to lay plans for putting Jesus to death. Then they bound him, led him away, and took him to Pilate, the Roman governor. When Judas, who had betrayed him, realized that Jesus had been condemned to die, he was filled with remorse. So he took the 30 pieces of silver back to the leading priests and elders. "I have sinned," he declared, "for I have betrayed an innocent man." "Why do we care?" they responded. "That's your problem." Then Judas threw the silver coins down in the temple and went out and hung himself. The leading priests picked up the coins. "It wouldn't be right to put this money in the temple treasury," they said, "since it was payment for murder." After some discussion, they decided to buy a potter's field, and they made it into a cemetery for foreigners. That is why the field is still called the Field of Blood. Thus fulfilled the prophecy of Jeremiah that says they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price at which he was valued by the people of Israel, and purchased the potter's field, as the Lord declared. Now Jesus was standing before Pilate, the Roman governor. "Are you the king of the Jews?" the governor asked him. Jesus replied, "You have said it." But when the leading priests and the elders made their accusations against him, Jesus remained silent. "Don't you hear all these charges they are bringing against you?" Pilate demanded. But Jesus made no response to any of the charges, much to the governor's surprise. Now, it was the governor's custom each year, during the Passover celebration, to release one prisoner to the crowd, anyone they wanted. This year, there was a notorious prisoner, a man named Barabbas. As the crowds gathered before Pilate's house that morning, he asked them, "Which one do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" He knew very well that the religious leaders had arrested Jesus out of envy. Just then, as Pilate was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent him a message. "Leave that innocent man alone. I suffered through a terrible nightmare about him all last night." Meanwhile, the leading priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas to be released and for Jesus to be put to death. So the governor again asked, "Which of these two do you want me to release to you?" And the crowd shouted back, "Barabbas!" Pilate responded, "Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" And they shouted back, "Crucify him!" "Why?" Pilate demanded. "What crime has he committed?" But the mob roared even louder, "Crucify him!" Pilate saw he wasn't getting anywhere, and that a riot was developing, so he sent for a bowl of water and washed his hands before the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood. The responsibility is yours." And the people yelled back, "We will take responsibility for his death, we and our children." So Pilate released Barabbas to them. He ordered Jesus flogged with a lead-tipped whip, then turned him over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified. Some of the governor's soldiers took Jesus into their headquarters and called out the entire regiment. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. They wove the thorn branches into a crown and put it on his head. And they placed a reed stick in his right hand as a scepter. They knelt before him in mockery and taunted him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spit on him and grabbed the stick and struck him on the head with it. When they were finally tired of mocking him, they took off the robe and put on his own clothes on him again. Then they led him away to be crucified. Along the way, they came across a man named Simon, who was from Cyrene. The soldiers forced him to carry Jesus' cross. And when they went out to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. The soldiers gave Jesus wine mixed with bitter gall, but when he had tasted it, he refused to drink it. After they nailed him to the cross, the soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. Then they sat around and kept guard as he hung there. A sign was fastened above Jesus' head, announcing the charge against him. It read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. Crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left, were two criminals. The people passing by shouted abuse, shaking their heads in mockery. "Look at you now," they yelled at him. "You said you were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Well, if you can, if you are the Son of God, save yourself. Come down from the cross." The leading priests and teachers of religious law and the elders also mocked Jesus. "He saved others," they scoffed, "but he can't save himself." So, is he the King of the Jews, of Israel? Is he? Let him come down from the cross right now and we'll believe in him. He trusted God, so let God rescue him if he wants him. For he said, "I am the Son of God." Even the revolutionaries who were crucified with him ridiculed him in the same way. At noon, darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. At about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you abandoned me?" Some of the bystanders misunderstood that and thought he was calling for the prophet Elijah. One of them ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, holding it up to him on a hyssop stalk so he could drink. But the rest said, "Wait, let's see whether Elijah comes to save him." Then Jesus shouted out again and released his spirit. At that moment, the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split apart, and tombs opened. The bodies of many godly men and women who had died were raised from the dead. They left the cemetery after Jesus' resurrection, went into the city, the holy city, and appeared to many people. The Roman officer and the other soldiers at the crucifixion were terrified by the earthquake and all that had happened. They said, "This man truly was the Son of God." And many women who had come from Galilee with Jesus to care for him were watching him from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, the mother of James of John, the sons of Zebedee. As evening approached, Joseph, a rich man from Arimathea, who had become a follower of Jesus, went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. And Pilate issued an order to release it to him. Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a long sheet of linen cloth. He placed it in his own new tomb, which had been carved out of the rock. He rolled a great stone across the entrance and left. Both Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting across the tomb watching. The next day, on the Sabbath, the leading priests and Pharisees went to see Pilate and told him, "Sir, we remember what the deceiver once said while he was still alive. After 3 days I will rise from the dead. So we request that you seal the tomb until the 3rd day. This will prevent the disciples from coming and stealing his body, and then telling everyone that he was raised from the dead. If this happens, we'll be worse off for it." Pilate replied, "Take guards and secure it as best you can." So they sealed the tomb and posted guards to protect it. This is Matthew's account of the crucifixion. It has some unique elements in it, but it's still a powerful story. It's a big jump from the Sermon on the Mount to here, but the Sermon on the Mount sets us up for why we got to here, that Jesus had authority that the Pharisees didn't have, and it was out of envy that they killed Jesus. And there's this whole narrative here where Jesus is the King of Israel. He is the King of the Jews. And they're mocking him and they're making fun of him, but Jesus wants to be on that cross. He's not going to come down. This is his mission. They're calling him down. They're saying, "Come down from the cross." But Jesus came to be on that cross. It's not accidental. It happened on purpose. And as those soldiers are bowing down to Jesus and saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," in mockery of him, he is. And as they post a sign above his head that says, "Jesus, the King of the Jews," that is true. They kill him for that. But it's who he was. It's a powerful story. And this is the center of Scripture here. This and the resurrection, which we'll come to in Luke and also in John. We're not going to get it in Matthew and Mark. We're only doing the crucifixion account because of the differences here. They're noticeable. So anyway, that's Matthew's story. It's a long one, long chapter. It's got a lot in it.